gentlemen, please welcome today's guest speaker, Mr. Naoki Hyakuta. どうぞ。
Thank you. If everyone could take their seats, please. My name is Robin Harding. I'm the Tokyo Bureau Chief for the Financial Times newspaper. And it's my pleasure today to introduce Mr. Naoki Hyakuta, one of Japan's best-selling, most popular, and most controversial novelists. A television screenwriter for many years, he found fame in particular with his 2006 novel, Eternal Zero, which was made into an award-winning film in 2013. He was appointed a governor of the public broadcaster NHK by Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, served in that capacity from 2013 to 2015. He's here today to speak about an incident that took place around a month ago at Hitotsubashi University, where he was invited to speak on the subject of the state of the media in modern Japan, a subject I'm sure is of great interest to all of us. But after a campaign by a campus group which accused him of hate speech, his appearance was cancelled. He's going to talk today about that event and what it means for freedom of speech in Japan and the willingness of Japanese universities to expose their students to a diverse range of views. So please join me in welcoming Mr. Hyakuta. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody.
百田直樹と申します。
My name is Naoki Hyakuta.
私は6月の10日に一橋大学で大学祭で講演をする予定でした。
I was scheduled to be giving a speech at Hitotsubashi University at their school festival on June 10.
この講演が大学内にある反レイシズム情報センターという団体から抗議を受けて最終的には中止に至りました。
However, the plans for this speech were opposed by a campus group called the Anti-Racism Information Center. As a result of this, the speech was in the end cancelled.
この団体は私もまだ調べてますが、実態はよく分かりません。メンバーがどれぐらいいて、そして実際に具体的にどういう活動をしているのか、細かいところまでは分かりません。ただ、この団体の主催者は、一橋大学の大学院生、34歳の大学院生です。
And this group, the Anti-Racism Information Center, well, it was not so clear initially as to the details of this group. However, after our research into this, it is still not clear how many members they have, for example, or the details of what kind of activities they are pursuing. However, the main organizer of this group is a 34-year-old graduate student at the university.
その、主催者の男性は34歳の大学院生は以前は在日コリアン青年連合という組織に所属していました。
And this organizer, this 34-year-old graduate student, prior to being affiliated or studying at Hitotsubashi University, he was working for the Zainichi Korean Seinen Rengo or Youth Union.
この団体の反レイシズム情報センターという団体のことは後ほどお話ししますけれども、まず彼らが 大学一橋大学の大学祭の実行委員会、この実行委員会が私を呼んでくれたんですが、この実行委員会に、要請書とは要望書を出しました。これは今年の4月です。
I will speak more about the details of this organization later. However, first I would like to mention that while the organizing committee for the University Festival had been the ones who invited me to speak, this organization, the Anti-Racism Information Center, sent a list of requests to the organizing committee in April.
彼らの要求を一言で言いますと、百田尚樹という作家はレイシストであり、差別扇動主義者である。こういう人物に、講演で発言をさせるわけにいかない、これが簡単に言うと彼らの趣旨でした。
And to briefly summarize the contents of their request, it was that they see that the author, Naoki Hyakuta, is a racist who is inciting discrimination and should not be allowed to speak at the university.
しかしながら、私はこれまで、ヘイトスピーチ並びに、差別扇動そういう発言は、一度も行っておりません。
However, to date, I have not once made any form of hate speech or incited discrimination in any way.
今回の講演のテーマは、現代におけるマスコミの在り方というものです。
The topic of the planned speech this time was the state of the mass media in today's society.
ですから人種問題あるいは民族問題こういうものには一切今回の講演のテーマは触れておりません。
Therefore, the topic of this speech had nothing at all to do with issues related to ethnicity or race.
それどころか私は過去200回近く講演を全国各地で講演をしておりますが、そういう人種問題民族問題に触れた講演は一度たりともしておりません。
In the past, I have conducted more than 200 talks in different places throughout the country, and on not one single occasion did I speak on topics of ethnicity or race.
にもかかわらず、反レイシズム情報センターの人たちは、私をヘイトスピーカー、あるいはそのレイシストというレッテルを貼って、私の発言を一切封じ込めました。
Despite this fact, however, the people associated with the Anti-Racism Information Center labeled me as a hate speaker or racist and completely put the lid on me being able to make any statements or remarks.
皆さんのところに配られているかも分かりませんが、ここに、反レイシズム情報センターが一橋大学の大学院にごめんなさい一橋大学の実行委員会に出した要望書があります。これコピーに皆さんのところにお配りしていると思います。でこれはまた後ほど皆さんしっかり読んでいただきたいんですが、
Today we have distributed to you in Japanese the document which is the requests which were submitted by the Anti-Racism Information Center to the organizing committee of the Kodaira Festival or the Hitotsubashi University Festival. I hope that you can take a look at the details listed there later.
今現在この問題がニュースになってあるいはネットで騒がれて反レイシズム情報センターの人たちは我々は講演会の中止は要求していないとこういう発言をしております。
Now that this issue has been reported in the media and it has also become a topic for discussion on the internet, the people affiliated with the Anti-Racism Information Center are saying that they were not actually calling for the cancellation of the lecture.
しかしこれは嘘です。
However, this is a lie.
彼らが出した要望書、もちろん皆さんにはお配りしておりますが、そのうちの一つを私は読み上げます。
And I would like to read one of the concrete parts from within their list of requests to demonstrate this.
いくつか不当とも思えるような条件を突きつけられたわけですが、そのうちの一つを読みます。百田直樹氏講演会、現代社会におけるマスコミの在り方、これテーマですね、に関しては、百田氏が絶対に差別を行わないことを誓約した上で、講演会冒頭で今までの差別扇動を撤回し、今後、準公人として人種差別撤廃条約の精神を遵守し、差別を行わない旨を宣言する等の、すみません、文章の中ですね、等の特別の差別防止措置の徹底を求めます。
And there are various different, unfair conditions which they have listed in their remarks or their demands, sorry. However, what I would like to read out is, in regards to Naoki Hyakuta's speech titled The State of the Mass Media in Today's Society, we ask that special measures to prevent discrimination be thoroughly undertaken. These measures are to include that Naoki Hyakuta pledges absolutely never to engage in discrimination, that he retracts at the beginning of his speech all previous incitements to discrimination, and that he publicly announces as a quasi-official person that he will never engage in discrimination and that he will comply with the spirit of the International Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination.
その次に、同時にこの条件が満たされない場合、講演会を無期限延期あるいは中止にしてください。
This follows on to say, likewise, if Hyakuta does not fulfill these conditions, then please either postpone his speech indefinitely or else cancel it altogether.
これは分かりやすく言いますと、私のこれまでの発言をヘイトスピーチであると勝手に決めつけて、そしてそれをまず講演の前にこれを私に謝罪撤回して、そして今後は二度とそういう発言を行わないということを私にまず宣誓させるということです。これは私の過去の発言、そして未来の発言さえも全て彼らがコントロールするということになります。
And this is very easy to understand. They are unilaterally deciding that statements I have made until now are indeed hate speech. They are calling for me to make an apology and retraction in regards to these and go as far as to pledge to never again do so. They are attempting to control all of my statements, both past and also future.
当然、この要求を突きつけられた実行委員会は、これを跳ねのけました。
And of course, at first when the organizing committee was sent this, well, they were reacted to this.
すると、反レイシズム情報センターの人たちは、諦めません。必要に、実行委員会の人たちと交渉をして、その交渉の席で、ほとんど脅しとも言えるような発言を何度も繰り返しています。
However, while the organizing committee still was going ahead with the planning of the speech, the people of the ARIC continued to, not give up. They continued to urge for negotiations with the festival organizing committee and continued to go as close as to what was, close to threatening even.
例えばこういう発言があります。百田直樹の講演を聞いて、ショックのあまり私は自殺するかもしれない。これは女性です。そうしたときに実行委員会はどう責任を取ってくれるのかと。
For example, one of the things which had been said was that a female student said, I may kill myself from the shock I will receive after hearing the speech of Naoki Hyakuta. If that happens, then how will the executive committee take responsibility?
はい、そんなに怖いなら聞かなければいいと思うんですが。
I think if she would be so afraid about this, well, she should just not listen to the speech.
さらに、もし百田直樹が講演をすれば、そこに講演会場でどんな騒動が起こるかわからない。と言いました。
They also said that if the speech is to take place, well, we don't know what kind of situation may occur in the venue.
そういういわゆる暴力事件が起こった場合に実行委員会は果たして責任を取れるのかと。こういう発言もありました。
Asking if violent incidents were to occur at the venue of the speech, then how would the organizing committee take responsibility for this?
これらは、刑法上、明らかな脅しではありません。
These may not be under the legal definitions directly criminal threats.
非常にグレーゾーンな脅しに近いんですけれども、こういうことを繰り返し交渉の場で言われて、実行委員会の方は根負けしたといいますか、ノイローゼになったといいますか、精神が参ってしまいました。
These threats were made in somewhat of a gray zone in regarding that aspect. However, the fact that they were repeatedly made at the situation of negotiations meant that many members of this organizing or executive committee became in a very emotional state.
ちなみに実行委員会は大学の1年生と2年生が中心です。19歳、20歳がメインです。
This organizing committee is mostly comprised of students in their first and second years of university, namely 19 and 20-year-olds.
そういう社会経験のない若者にですね、34歳の主催者である、いろいろ経験豊富な男性がいろんな手で、圧力をかけたというのが実態です。
Therefore, we can see that it was in fact a reality that these young people who still lack a lot of social experience as adults, were having this kind of pressure from a 34-year-old who is very experienced in many ways.
実行委員会は万が一の事態にならないように、警備会社にも非常に多くの警備を依頼したようです。
And in order to prevent a situation from taking place, the organizing committee made a request to a security company to provide extensive security for the event.
しかしながら警備が大きくなりすぎて、大学祭の他のイベントにどうも影響があるということで、彼らは最終的に講演を中止にしました。
However, as a result of this extensive security being brought on campus, it was thought that this may have an impact on other events which were planned to take place as part of the university festival. And it is for this reason that the organizing committee made the decision to cancel the speech.
分かりやすく言いますと、実行委員会にそこまでのことを大きな警備を要求するほどに、いろいろ反レイシズム情報センターは圧力を加えたということです。
To put this simply, we can see that the Anti-Racism Information Center put so much pressure onto the organizing committee, demanding, or which led to the situation that they had to put such extensive security in place.
それでですね、最終的には、私の6月の10日の講演は中止になりましたけれども、反レイシズム情報センターはさらに、インターネット上で、こういう発言をしております。
So eventually, my planned talk, which was to take place on June 10th, was cancelled. However, even after this, the Anti-Racism Information Center went further and made the following statement on the internet.
今から申し上げるのが反レイシズム情報センターの宣言文です。
And this is from the statement of the Anti-Racism Information Center.
私たちは差別、極右活動のない学園祭実現のため、10日当日に差別監視活動を行うことにしました。
In order to prevent any discriminatory or any racist or extreme right activities from taking place at the university festival, on June 10, the day of the festival, we will conduct monitoring activities.
差別・極右活動の発生を監視し、発見し次第、記録と通報を行います。
On the day of the 10th, we will be conducting activities to monitor any discriminatory or extreme right activities, and in the case where they are discovered, we will record and report these activities.
通報といいますのは、小平祭、これ大学祭ですね、大学祭と、それから大学当局で、さらに、法務省ですね、法務省にも、自分たちが差別と認めたものを監視して発見次第、これを法務省ないし大学当局に通報すると彼らは宣言しました。
And they're referring to the word reporting in regards to any activities they may monitor, is referring to reporting to the organizers of the Kodaira Festival, the Hitotsubashi University Students Festival, to the university authorities, and for those activities which they see or deem to be discriminatory, to the Ministry of Justice.
私はこれは非常に恐ろしい問題だと思います。
I think that this is a very, terrifying situation indeed.
つまり民間の団体が一般学生を監視し、そして彼らが定義するところの差別というふうに見なし、そしてそれを通報する。これはスターリン時代の秘密警察にも似ています。
This situation is where a civil organization would be monitoring regular students at a university, and if they would see anything that this particular organization defines as discrimination, report this. This is really a very close situation to the secret police under Stalin.
あるいは民間ということで言えば、中国の公衛兵にも似てるかもしれません。
Or if we say as a civil organization, this is also perhaps similar to, the situation in China of monitoring of citizens.
確かに差別は絶対に良くない。
Of course, discrimination is something which is not good.
ヘイトスピーチも良くない。
The same for hate speech.
もちろんレイシズムは許されません。
We should also not allow racism.
しかしながらこれを、民間団体が、勝手にというかもう彼らの意思によって、そのヘイトスピーカーあるいはレイシストそしてあるいは差別扇動主義者というレッテルを彼らが自由に貼ることができそして、彼らがそのレッテルを貼った人物は発言させないというこれはもうとんでもないことだと思います。
However, the situation where a particular civil organization could, on their own will, in their own way, make their own definition of who they would themselves label as, conducting hate speech, being a hate speaker, being a racist, or inciting racism, that they could freely make such a label and prevent people from speaking on this basis.
そこで、先ほど申し上げました反レイシズム情報センターの日頃の活動なんですけれどもこれまで言ってませんね。
そうですね。
はい。彼らはさまざまな人物、これは主に保守系の政治家に多いんです。あるいは保守系の文化人、保守系のジャーナリスト、そういう人たちの、過去の発言、あるいは記者会見での発言、あるいはツイッターでの発言、こういう発言を彼らは掘り起こして、彼ら自身がこの発言はヘイトスピーチである。この発言は、人種差別発言であるというふうに勝手に定義してこれをデータベース化しています。
I would like to next introduce some of the regular activities of this organization, ARIC. They are digging up past statements, whether from public statements, press conferences, Twitter, and so on, of mostly conservative politicians, cultural figures, and journalists. And according to their own definitions, categorizing them whether they are hate speech or racist comments, then what they define as such, they are including into a database.
現在私が確認したところでは、彼らが、リストアップした人物は全部で120人を超えます。
As far as I have been able to confirm at the moment, the people who they have listed in their database is more than 120.
そしてその彼らがヘイトスピーチと彼らが定義した発言は今現在2800を超えています。
And the statements which they have categorized as being hate speech are more than 2,800.
これは今でもインターネットで見れますので皆さんももし、時間があれば確認していただきたい。この2800の発言のほとんどはヘイトスピーチでもレイシズム発言でも何でもありません。
And these are all made public, or their database is available on the internet. So I hope that if you have time, you are able to confirm this for yourselves. But of the 2,800 statements which are recording in there, almost none of them are indeed hate speech or racist remarks.
もちろん私も全部は確認しておりませんが、私が今見たところですね、そういう発言のほとんどは中国政府、あるいは韓国政府、あるいは北朝鮮政府、こういうものに対する批判的な発言は、すべて、彼らはヘイトスピーチというふうにどうも定義づけているようです。
Of course, I have not checked the contents of all of these statements which are listed in their database. However, of those I have been able to look at, the majority are actually statements which are being critical of the governments of China, South Korea, or North Korea. And it is these statements which they are unilaterally defining as being hate speech.
そのいくつかの例を申し上げます。
I would like to share several examples of these.
例えば、元東京都知事の石原慎太郎さんの言葉ですが、
For example, some statements of the former governor of Tokyo, Mr. Ishihara Shintaro.
彼のこの発言がヘイトスピーチと言われています。彼ら定義されています。言います。現在の中国は軍事力を背景にした唯一の帝国主義だ。
Currently, China is having its military power in the background and or it is the only imperial power today.
これが反レイシズム情報センターに言わせれば、これがヘイトスピーチということになります。
According to the Anti-Racism Information Center, even this comment is categorized as hate speech.
例えば私の発言、
And one of my own remarks,
少し長いんですが、特攻隊員を賛美することは戦争を肯定することだとドヤ顔で述べる人がいるのに呆れる。ドヤ顔って分かりますかね。得意げに。はい。
And my remark, it is a little bit long, but to start, I am astonished that anybody could say with a straight face that praising the kamikaze pilots is somehow equivalent to agreeing with war.
逃れられぬ死を逃れられぬ死を前にして家族と祖国、そして見送る者たちを思いながら笑顔で死んでいった男たちを賛美することが悪なのか。
What is wrong with praising men who, when faced with inevitable death, gladly went to meet it while thinking of their families, ancestors, and those who saw them off?
戦争否定のためには彼らをバカと罵れというのか。
Am I to ridicule them as idiots in order to deny war?
そんなことはできない。
I cannot do that.
この発言が反レイシズム情報センターに言わせれば、これもヘイトスピーチということになるそうです。
So according to the Anti-Racism Information Center, even such a statement as this is listed as being hate speech.
今いくつかの例を言いましたけれども、これまた皆さんインターネットで彼らの2800以上定義づけられている、データベース化されているこの発言はいつでも見れますので、皆さんご覧になって確認してください。
So this is but a few examples of the 2,800 statements which are defined as hate speech and listed in their database. These are all available freely on the internet, so I hope that you can also look at these further yourselves.
反レイシズム情報センターの最終目的は私も分かりません。
I myself am not sure what the actual or the goal of the Anti-Racism Information Center is.
しかし彼らは今現在120人以上の人物をリストアップして、そしてその人物の過去の発言をいくつもデータベース化して、そして、彼らはその120人以上の人物をレイシストであり差別先導主義者であると定義づけています。
However, it is a fact that they have listed up more than 120 public figures, looked at all of their past statements and listed these in a database, and labeled these 120 plus people as racist or hate speakers who are inciting racism.
今回、一橋大学で初めて彼らの最終目的の一つが明らかになったのではないかなと私考えております。
However, I believe that actually one of their ultimate aims was actually or became clear as a result of this situation at Hitotsubachi University.
それは彼らがレイシストと定義づけた人物の発言を封じ込めてしまう。もしかしたらこれが彼らの最終目的ではないかと。で、これが今回一橋大学で起こったと見ています。
I believe that their ultimate goal is indeed actually to prevent people who they define as being racist from being able to speak. And this is indeed what happened at the situation at Hitotsubashi University.
私は彼らに言いたい。
I would like to say to them,
有名なボルテールの言葉があります。
there is a famous quote by Voltaire.
私は君の意見には反対だが、
I may disagree with your opinion.
君が意見をすることには命をかけて守ると。
But I will defend with my life your right to say it.
これがなくなれば言論の自由は滅びると思います。
If this is gone, then I believe that we would indeed lose the freedom of expression.
以上です。ありがとうございました。
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Well, we'll now move to Q&A, and while Mr. Hyakuta is catching his breath, let me just remind you of a few rules. First, this is a press club, not a debating society, so please ask questions rather than giving speeches. Second, please ask one question only. Be respectful of your colleagues' time. I'm sure there will be many people who wish to ask questions. And finally, please state your name and affiliation when you come up to ask a question. So, who would like to go first? Yes. Yes, for Lady Yoga.
フリーのジャーナリストの小川と申します。私もちょっとこの問題を追っていたもので、短く2つだけ質問させてください。
One, please.
1つ目は、
質問の方1つだけですいません。
はい、
My name is Ogawa. I'm a freelance and I've been following this issue.
はい、そうですね。アリックというこの反レイシズム情報センターが今回の講演、百田氏の講演を中心させたというのが最初の百田氏の論点でしたけれども、私が追ってきました事実はそれではなくて、百田氏の講演が決まった時にですね、なんと1万人以上の反対署名がたっと集まったんですね。そして学内では60人以上の教員が反対をしました。百田氏はこれまで全国でたくさんの講演をしてらしたようですけれども、初めて大学というアカデミックで、そして留学生も多い場で講演をされるということが、これが否定されたので怒っている部分もあられるのかもしれませんが、これだけの反対の事実というのは単にアリックという一人の青年の話を随分なさいましたが、その人がしたことではなく、1万人以上の署名というのの重みをどう受け止めてられるかを伺いたいと思います。
I have been following this situation, and I would like to say one of the things which has come up in my research, which is perhaps somewhat different to your statement, is you said that the organization ARIC was responsible for cancelling your talk. However, according to the research I have conducted, we can see that after your speech was announced initially, there was an online petition which actually had more than 10,000 signatures calling for the cancellation of the speech. I have also heard that there was opposition from more than 60 lecturers at the university as well. Of course, you have given many speeches throughout Japan, but I believe that perhaps this opposition, or it was perhaps a different situation due to the fact that it was taking place in an academic location and also a university which has many foreign exchange students. So to say that the reason for the cancellation or the opposition is just because of the one organization or one individual leading it is perhaps somewhat different to what would seem to be illustrated by this high number of people. I would like to ask your comments on the weight of that number of people in opposition.
はい、先ほど1万人の署名活動が集まったと、おっしゃいましたけれども、この1万人はほとんどが、多分学外です。大学以外の人です。そして、この1万人を多いと見るか少ないと見るかですけれども、例えば反レイシズム情報センターがまず最初にインターネットで、百田直樹の講演会を中止するように署名活動をインターネット上で広く告知しました。でその時に、実は私は初めて言いますけれども、日本の民進党というその政党、この政党の有田芳生というその議員がいます。でこの有田芳生は早速これをですね、キャンペーンと自ら書いて、そして、この署名活動を広く賛同するという、これを広くこう知らしめたいということで、非常に拡散しました。で私は、実は民進党とは非常に仲が悪い。民進党の悪口をしょっちゅう言ってます。でさらに私は実は、韓国に対して、あるいは北朝鮮に対して、この政府の北朝鮮、あるいは韓国政府のやり方に対して、非常に批判的な発言をたくさんしています。ツイッターでもしています。ですから、私を快く思わない、韓国の方、あるいは北朝鮮の方は非常に多いです。そしてさらに、政治家の、いわゆる拡散によって、1万人が署名したと私は考えています。
There is a mention of the petition which had more than 10,000 signatures online. First of all, the point I would like to make is probably the majority of people who sign this petition are not actually from within the university. They are people who are not affiliated or from outside of the university. Of course, whether to judge whether 10,000 is many signatures or not so many is perhaps subjective. However, the point that I would like to make is that when the ARIC first actually called for this position online, it was actually taken up by a Diet member from the Minshinto, or the Democratic Party. The Diet member's name is Mr. Arita, and he shared this very broadly online saying that this is a big campaign to support this petition and that it should be shared broadly as well. It was a result of this spreading online actually by the Diet member from the Democratic Party, which led to perhaps this high number of signatures or this number of signatures on the petition. I, of course, myself, I have quite a bad relationship with the Democratic Party. I'm often very critical of them. I'm also often extremely critical of the governments of both South and North Korea and of their actions or their way of being as well. I'm also critical of them on my Twitter. However, when we look and considering this criticism, I believe that, well, there are probably a lot of people from South Korea or North Korea who do not necessarily like me. However, it was the spreading by this particular politician which led to 10,000 signatures on the petition.
Thank you. Do we have more questions? Oh, yes, the gentleman here. I should say I welcome follow-up questions.
My name is Hiroki Shita, freelance journalist affiliated with Yukan Fuji. I'm known as the right-wing journalist here. And it seems that any criticism to U.S. forces, Abe, are not within this category of hate speech or whatever. So I wonder, what do you, Hyakuta-san, think of this kind of, sort of a biased view by this organization?
私は国家に対する批判、あるいはその政策に対する批判は全くヘイトスピーチに当たらないと考えております。
I believe that criticisms of the state or of political policy is not hate speech.
Does that answer your question?
それでよろしいでしょうか?
That's fine. Okay. Okay. Who else would like to ask a question? Yes, Khaldun.
Thank you. My name is Azari Panorate News. I just follow up one short question first. He asked you about the criticism against the government and the American forces. So what is your answer about criticism against the American forces, especially in Okinawa? Do you think that's also a hate speech? But my question is, how do you evaluate the freedom of expression in Japan during Mr. Abe's administration? There's a lot of criticism that the freedom of expression in Japan is shrinking, but we haven't seen anybody arrested because of their opinion. And they say always that journalists are having self-censorship. So how can we deal with self-censorship? Thank you.
日本の報道陣が政府に対して気を使って自粛ということは全くありません。
I do not believe that the members of the media in Japan are conducting any kind of self-censorship or self-restriction towards the Japanese government.
世界の国と比較することは私はできませんけれども、日本のテレビ、新聞の、報道機関ですね、報道機関はもうこれぐらい自由に政府批判、あるいはその首相批判を堂々と繰り返す報道機関の国は他にないんじゃないでしょうか。
Of course, I am personally not able to compare with the situation globally, but I believe that when we look at television and newspapers in Japan, I find it difficult to think of another country where such repeated and free criticism of the government and of the Prime Minister can take place.
政府を批判して激しく批判する、あるいは首相を激しく批判する、こういうことによって、いわゆる罰せられた人は全くいません。
There has been no one, shall we say, punished for severe criticism of the government or prime minister in Japan.
むしろその反対で、報道機関を批判した文化人に対しては、報道機関は凄まじい報復攻撃をします。
In fact, it is the opposite situation. Cultural figures who are critical of the media in Japan actually are really taken aback or the subject of heavy criticism.
私はそれを身をもって味わっております。
And I can very much speak for this from my personal experience.
Okay, Linda.
Linda C. from Reuters. Sort of following up in that line, recently ahead of the Tokyo local election, Tokyo Assembly election, some members of the LDP were critical of the media, of the Japanese media, saying that, you know, they were to some extent or responsible for the bad image of the LDP, which then led to the defeat. Do you think that this criticism by the LDP of the media, of its handling of the so-called scandals, etc., is appropriate criticism for a politician to make of the media? Thank you.
ここにおられる方は日本に何年も滞在されておられると思いますけれども、日本のメディアぐらい変更メディアはありません。
I believe that those of you who are here have probably been in Japan for several years, but the Japanese media itself is quite particular.
特にテレビがひどいです。
And particularly, this is a bad situation for the television.
世界各国のテレビと比べることは私はできませんけれども、日本のテレビは半世紀以上にわたってわずか数局が、認可されて、その既得権益は50年間手放しません。
And actually, well, I'm not able to compare this with the television situation in other countries as well, but for the past half a century, for more than 50 years, it's actually only a handful of television broadcasters who have been able to, well, register here in Japan, and they continue to really hold this themselves throughout these decades.
自由参加ができないんです。
Free participation is not possible.
新聞や本は誰でもが発行してそれを出版することができます。
In the case of newspapers and books, anybody who wishes to is able to publish these items.
ですから誰が何を書いてもいいと思います。
Therefore, I believe that anybody should be able to write anything which they wish.
しかしテレビは少し事情が違います。
However, the situation is somewhat different for television.
本来国民の共有財産である電波をわずか数局が50年、60年にわたって支配しています。
The current situation in Japan is that the airwaves, which is an asset which should be held by the Japanese people, is really being monopolized by just a few channels, a few broadcasters for the past 50, 60 years.
それゆえ政治的な報道に関しては公正中立が本来は求められると考えています。
Therefore, when we consider political reporting, there should be a situation where fair and neutral reporting takes place.
しかしながら、日本の現在のテレビはとにかく反政府だけじゃない、もう極端なこと言いますと反日です。
However, the current Japanese television is very anti-government, and even to say it in a more extreme way, anti-Japanese.
日本では長いことこれが、正しい文化と考えられておりました。
For a long time in Japan, this has held as being the correct culture.
ですからテレビは政権をいくら批判してもいい。
Therefore, television can criticize the government as much as they wish.
という姿勢で、長年報道してきました。
This is the stance upon which Japanese television broadcasting has taken place for many years until now.
ですからそれは同じ政治家のスキャンダルであっても野党政治家と与党政治家では扱いが100対1ぐらい違います。
Therefore, when we consider if even the same political scandal were to take place, whether the politician in question is from the ruling government or from the opposition party, means that there is a completely different response.
そして政府を弁護するコメンテーターあるいは文化人は日本のテレビではまず呼ばれません。
And commentators on Japanese television who take a position of defending the government are not invited to appear on programs.
これが日本のテレビの現状です。ですから、日本の与党政治家が、時折、頭にきて、メディア批判をする気持ちは理解できます。
Therefore, considering this current reality, I can understand why politicians from the ruling government would sometimes be, well, frustrated by this and make critical statements of the media.
Linda, please.
Sorry, just to follow up, the criticism that I was aware of by the Japanese politicians actually seemed to be referring to newspapers and said, we don't have to buy them if we don't like them, kind of comment. So it was not specifically aimed at television as your reply was. So I guess what I'd like to ask is, are you suggesting that Japanese media are guilty of so-called fake news? Thank you.
フェイクニュースを日本のメディアが報道していると思いますが、今の現状で。
私の見るところ、朝日新聞は非常にフェイクニュースが多いです。
As far as I can see, the Asahi Shimbun or the Asahi newspaper has a lot of fake news.
過去も現在も多いんですけれども、過去の朝日新聞のフェイクニュースで最も日本に大きなダメージをマイナスを与えたのは、朝鮮人の従軍ヤフの強制連行です。
And this has been the case both in the past and still today as well. But if we look at past incidences, the case where the fake news by the Asahi Shimbun has most damaged Japan is the case of their reporting on the so-called forced taking away of Korean comfort women.
今、日本と韓国の間で一番大きな問題となって、国際問題となっている従軍ヤフ問題は、朝日新聞のフェイクニュースから始まりました。
The comfort women issue, which is currently the biggest international issue between the two countries of Japan and South Korea, started from the Asahi Shimbun.
1980年代のことです。
This was in the 1980s.
このフェイクニュースを朝日新聞は32年間訂正しませんでした。
The Asahi Shimbun did not correct this fake news for 32 years.
32年後に朝日新聞はこれを訂正しましたが、もはや、国際問題となってしまった火を消すことはできません。
32 years later, the Asahi Shimbun did actually make a correction in regards to this fake news. However, it's not possible to get rid of the international issue, which it has become now.
最近でも森友学園あるいは加計学園、この2つを朝日新聞は、社運をかけて報道しておりますが、全く大きな疑惑というものは出てきません。
And recently, if we look at the issues of the Moritomo Gakuen and Kake Gakuen, the Asahi Shimbun has been putting all of its efforts into reporting of this. However, serious or significant doubts have not come up in regards to these situations.
Okay, any more questions? Yes, gentleman here.
アソシエイトメンバーの塩村です。アソシエイトメンバーというのは記者ではないという意味ですね。先週の都議会議員の秋葉原の安倍首相の演説の時に、帰れ帰れというコールが出ましたが、あれに対する安倍さんの対応って必ずしも上手でなかったなと、残念ながら僕はちょっと感じたんですね。もしも百田さんが安倍さんにもっと上手にこう対応したらどうというふうにアドバイスするとしたら、何かいいアイデアがありますかと、ちょっとお考えになっている間に、私は一橋大学の OB でしてですね、今回のことは非常に残念に思っております。先ほどご質問ありましたけれども、一橋大学っていうのは1学年が今1000人ぐらいしかおりませんので、2学年で2000人ぐらいの生徒しかいません、学生しかいません。だから1万人のほとんどとおっしゃいましたけど、学生はほぼゼロだと思います。
My name is Shiyomura. I am an associate member of the club. I am not actually a working journalist. I would like to ask a question regarding to Prime Minister Abe's speech in Akihabara in the lead up to the recent Tokyo Metropolitan Assembly elections, at the time when there was large calls of opposition from the members in the audience who were gathered there. It could be said that his response was perhaps not so skillful in how he dealt with that situation. My question to you is, if you could give some advice to Prime Minister Abe now, how would you suggest that he could perhaps better respond to this situation? And as a side note, I am actually a graduate of Hitotsubashi University. At the moment, there are only 1,000 students in each school year there. So when we consider 10,000 petition signatures, we can see clearly that this is not all students of the university.
今の話は非常に面白い話でありまして、秋葉原で、大勢の聴衆が安倍総理の演説を聞きました。
This is a very interesting question. Many people were present to hear Prime Minister Abe's speech at Akihabara.
ところがこれを報道した日本のテレビ局は画像の切り取りをやりました。
However, the television which was reporting about this actually was cutting the scene quite closely.
日本のテレビ局が報道した画面を見ると、まるで聴衆の全員が安倍帰れというふうな映像に見えます。
If you look at the television shots or the cuts which were shown on the Japanese television, it looks like all of the people who were gathered there to hear his speech were joining the call Abe go home.
ところが、実際の映像はですね、ものすごい広いところに大勢の人がいます。そしてそこの一角だけ、わずか本当一角だけ、動員された安倍反対派がそこに集結していました。
However, if you look at the real footage from the scene, you could see that it's a very large area with many people gathered, and it's only one particular corner, one particular area of these people gathered, where there are people who were anti-Abe, who were mobilized to be there to join these opposition calls.
安倍総理を取り囲む360度の周辺は、ほとんどが、安倍総理の話を聞きたい、あるいは安倍総理を応援したいという人で埋まっていました。ところが一角だけ、そのわずか、30メートル四方の一角だけ反対派が陣取っていました。
If you look at the 360-degree scene of where Mr. Abe was speaking, you could see that the majority of people who were gathered there were there because they wanted to hear him speak or they wanted to express support. It is just this 30-meter squared area that you can see where people were mobilized to be there to express opposition.
ところが日本のテレビ局はその一角の周辺にだけ集まっていました。
However, all of the media who were present there, the Japanese media, were just focusing on that one little corner.
そして決して全体を映さずにその一角をクローズアップしてテレビで放送していました。
And the broadcasting on the television, therefore, was not of the overall scene, but just close up of this particular area.
非常に汚い報道のやり方です。
It's a very dirty way of broadcasting.
そして安倍総理が、彼らに向かって、彼らは安倍総理に非常に汚いヤジをたくさん飛ばしました。
And they were being very vocal in some quite negative expressions against Mr. Abe.
先ほどから申し上げてますように、ある一角からだけそのヤジが飛んでいました。
And these calls were coming just from this one particular area.
それで安倍総理は、こんなやつに負けるわけにいかないと言いました。
And Mr. Abe said in response to this, we can't lose to such people as that.
西村さん
塩
村さんごめんなさい。塩村さんは、もっといいアドバイスがなかったかと私に、問われましたけれども、私ならもっと汚い言葉で罵しています。
Mr. Shiomura asked if I had any better advice to Mr. Abe, but if it were me, I would have actually used much dirty or much stricter way of responding to them.
Okay, yes, the gentleman in the front here.
フリーランスの田中隆作と申します。お疲れ様です。土曜日の秋葉原での、さっきおっしゃった安倍首相への汚い批判とおっしゃってましたが、あれですね、私現場にいました。全方位から安倍さんへの批判の文言は飛んでました。でそれは百田さんがおっしゃるような汚い言葉ではありません。もっともちゃんとした正当な批判でした。国会をちゃんと開けとか嘘をつくなとか。百田さんは現場に行かれたんでしょうか。
行ってません。
じゃあ百田さんこそフェイクニュースではないですか。
My name is Tanaka. I am a freelance journalist. Actually, I was there in person on Saturday at the speech in Akihabara. And being there in person, I could actually see that these critical calls or calls in opposition were coming from all directions of the area there, not from just one particular area. Also, these were not sort of dirty or calls, as you mentioned, but they were people saying, open the diet again, or don't lie. These kind of calls were the statements which were being made by the people being vocally critical of Prime Minister Abe at the time of his speech. I would like to ask Mr. Hyakuta, were you there in person? And if not, well, then isn't your statement fake news? And the response was, no, I was not there.
全体像を捉えるのは非常に難しいです。これを本当に全体像を捉えると思うと、もう一人一人全部調査しないといけません。で、私はある意味、極端な形で申し上げました。つまり、もちろんその周りにも安倍総理を批判する人はもちろんいたでしょう。ただし私が言いたかったのは、安倍総理を批判する一団があるところに集められていたということです。そしてテレビはそこを集中的に放送したということ、私はこれを言いたかったんです。その他にも安倍総理いっぱいいたでしょう。ただし私は全体の写真を見ています。私はその現場には行っておりませんが、全体の写真を見ていますが、全体の写真を見てますと、各地に日の丸の旗が上がってました。ところがこれは実際にテレビではこれはほとんど見ることはありませんでした。
Of course, it is difficult to have a complete overview of a particular scene, a particular situation. You would need to ask each and every person who was there, for example, to have the full view of the overall scene. However, what I said previously, it was perhaps maybe a little bit of an extreme way of pushing it. There way, of course, being people surrounding that particular corner who were also vocal in their opposition to Mr. Abe. However, the point that I would like to emphasize is the fact that these people in opposition were gathered in one particular place, and the fact that the television corners were all concentrated in that one particular area is the point of concern which I would like to express. Of course, there may have been other people in other parts of the audience who were in opposition. However, this is not coming clear at all in the television broadcasting or representation of that scene.
Okay, this is last chance for questions. Does anybody have a remaining question? I'll take all the remaining questions in one go. So one here, Calden briefly, the gentleman there, in that order.
はい。
Siegfried Nidl, freelancer from Germany. United Nations made some research on freedom of the speech in Japan, and they had a different view on freedom of the speech. They say the freedom of the speech is in danger in Japan. So, do you think the United Nations, or perhaps it's manipulated by the Asahi Shimbun, or why? Why do the United Nations have a different view?
Thank you, Khaldun Azhar again. I have a comment, follow up on your question. You said the Japanese TVs have been manipulating the scene since decades ago, and they were anti-government. But we know the government gives license to the TVs. So if the government is upset about this, they could have, given license to those who support the government or created some TV supporting the ruling party. So don't you see this is contradiction what you said? Thank you.
Thank you. And the gentleman in the middle of the table there.
朝日新聞社の岩崎と申します。先ほどフェイクニュースというご指摘いただきまして、一語申し上げたいなと思いまして、慰安婦問題については確かにですね、大きな誤報を打ったことは間違いございませんし、訂正が遅れたというのもその通りだと思います。ですがやはり国際問題のあらゆる元凶が、そこだと言われるのはちょっといささか乱暴かなというふうに聞かせていただきました。その上で、私どもの社長に対して百田さん過去のツイートで、半殺しにしてやるというふうなこともおっしゃってましたが、今でもそのお気持ちに変わりがないかということと、ヘイトスピーチではないにしても、これほど素晴らしい作品を書かれている作家の方としてですね、そういうお言葉遣いでいいんでしょうかというご質問をさせていただければと思います。
And to translate the third question, I am a reporter of the Asahi Shimbun, which you have been referring to as the source of fake news. In regards to, first of all, the comfort women issue which you mentioned, I would like to make a brief statement regarding this. Of course, the situation of the misreporting and the correction which was made in the newspaper is indeed fact, as you have mentioned. However, to state that the international situation or the diplomatic situation between the two countries was a result of this Asahi reporting is perhaps, or I think perhaps a rough way of putting this. I would like to ask a comment also. You have mentioned in Twitter, I believe, in regards to the president of the Asahi Shimbun, that you would, well, how to say this? You would really bash him, or you would want to really destroy him in a very rough way of saying this. Perhaps this may not itself be hate speech, but I would like to ask, do you still feel the same way? And as someone who is the writer of such great literature, using words in such a way, is this really something that you feel is suitable for your position?
いいですか？一つ目からね。
そうですね、国連の方ですね。
国連についてお答えいたします。
First, to answer the question regarding the United Nations.
実は日本における反政府活動、あるいは反日文化人、あるいはジャーナリスト、こういう人たちは長年、もう20年も30年も前から国連を利用してきました。
Actually, in Japan, cultural figures who are anti-government or anti-Japanese have been using the United Nations for the past 20 or 30 years.
彼らは私費で、自分の金で、国連に毎年出かけて、そして、日本の悪口を国連で言い続けてきました。
They have continued to use their own funds to go to the United Nations every year and make negative statements about Japan.
日本には表現の自由がない。日本は、人権侵害の国。そして日本は、朝鮮人慰安婦を奴隷のように扱った。この性奴隷という言葉を使ったのも日本の弁護士です。
They have, for example, been saying that there is no freedom of expression in Japan, that Japan is a country of human rights violations, and that the Korean comfort women, talking about them in the situation of slavery, this word of sex slaves was actually first used by a Japanese lawyer.
そして彼らは、国連の委員会に、日本の悪口を言って、そして国連がそれに対して反応する、あるいはその日本を批判する、それをまた日本に持って帰って、国連が日本を批判していると大きな声で、それを報道しました。
Therefore, they go to the United States, they speak at various committees there, they make appeals and say bad things about Japan. Then the United States, of course, responds to this, at times also makes criticisms of Japan. These activists then bring this back to Japan and say the United Nations even is criticizing Japan.
国連を政治利用している日本の団体は非常に多いです。
There are many organizations in Japan who are politically using the United Nations.
例えば従軍慰安婦に関しますと、もう20年以上前から毎年、日本の弁護士、高木、それから戸塚、この2人の弁護士、それからさらに、日本のいろんな各種団体が国連に行って、従軍慰安婦が、日本が戦争中に従軍慰安婦いかにひどいことをしてきたかを言い続けましたけれども、その間、日本の外務省は一言もこれに抗議しませんでした。
For example, if we take the example of the comfort women issue, for more than 20 years, Japanese lawyers have been going to the United Nations and talking about this. The names of these lawyers are Takagi and Totsuka, and there are many other organizations who are involved in this as well. However, they are going to the United Nations and saying that Japan has been responsible for doing such terrible things. However, the Japanese Ministry of Foreign Affairs has not made any protest against this.
2年前に日本の杉田という女性が国連に行って、日本の戸塚あるいは高木、それ以外のそういう各種団体がそれまで国連で喋っていたことは全て嘘であったという発言をして、そして国連委員会は非常に驚きました。
2 years ago, a Japanese woman called Ms. Sugita went to the United Nations. She made a statement that the comments or the remarks which had been made by the lawyers Totsuka, Takagi, and other organizations were all lies. The United Nations was very surprised to hear this.
それで国連は日本の外務省に初めてこれはどこまで真実なのかということを外務省に問い合わせて、外務省が初めてそれは全て嘘ですと、答えました。
Therefore, after this, for the first time, the United Nations made a request to the Japanese Ministry of Foreign Affairs asking MOFA to express to what extent are these claims true. And this was the first time that MOFA went to the United Nations and said, in fact, all of these facts are lies.
日本の外務省はバカです。
The Japanese Ministry of Foreign Affairs are idiots.
私も反日日本人かもしれません。
Perhaps I am also an anti-Japanese Japanese person.
2つ目の質問です。
2つ目の方が免許の話ですね、テレビの。
はい、本来は、テレビ局は認可事業です。そしてこの認可を与えるのは日本の総務省という省庁です。ですから総務庁はその認可を取り消すことも法律上は可能です。ところが2年前ですかね、去 去年ですか、ちょっとその辺ははっきりしません、総務大臣の、高市さんという総務大臣があまりひどい、報道をすると、認可を取り消すということも法律上はあり得ると、あくまで法律的な条文をそのまま言うただけなんですが、そのまま発言しただけなんですが、これがメディアに、大批判されました。
In reality, of course, it is the Japanese ministry which is responsible for giving permissions for broadcasting licenses, including for television. And the ministry also has the power to, at any time, also revoke these licenses. The decision for the television licensing is made by the government ministry. However, I believe it was perhaps 2 years ago or last year, I'm not sure of the exact timing, but Minister Takaichi, who is responsible of this, actually made a comment based on the Japanese law regarding telecommunications that if bad reporting were to take place, then the license could be revoked. And this statement made by the minister became hugely criticized in the Japanese media.
先ほどひどい番組と言いましたが、ちょっと言い換えます。日本には放送法という放送に関する法律があります。高市大臣はこの放送法を無視する、あるいは放送法を守らない局に関しては、法律上は、テレビ局に対する認可を取り消すという条文があると、こういうような発言でした。
And well, before I mentioned, or I said that the minister referred to bad reporting taking place, it was not necessarily a statement about bad reporting, but she said that if television stations were not obeying the Japanese broadcasting law, then by law it would be possible to revoke their television licenses.
高市大臣はあくまで法律の条文を発言しただけなんですけれども、高市大臣は、日本の報道陣、マスメディアからもう散々叩かれました。
And the minister, well, she only read out the text of this law, in fact, or she only talked about the contents of this law. However, she was very severely bashed by the Japanese media as a result.
最後ね。
朝日
はい。
の方ですね。
私が朝日新聞の社長を半殺しにすると発言したのは、いくつか背景があります。
There are several points in the background to the statement I made regarding the president of Asahi.
かつて朝日新聞が北朝鮮がミサイルを開発したときに、朝日新聞が自社の新聞でこういう自分でクエスチョンを出して、そして自分でアンサー、答えというふうに記事を書きました。
At the time, or on an issue regarding the missile development of North Korea, the Asahi Shimbun published an article which included a question and answer, with the answer also included in the same article.
質問はこういう質問です。もし日本に北朝鮮のミサイルが撃ち込まれたらどうするかという、こういう質問です。
The question was, if a North Korean missile was to come to Japan, what should be done?
この時朝日新聞が自らこう答えています。
And the answer that the Asahi itself listed was as follows.
そのミサイルが一発だけなら誤射かもしれない。
If that missile is only one single missile, it may have been accidentally fired.
それで一発だけならミスかもしれないと言ったんですね。で、これが多分ちょっと覚えてますけど、1990年代の朝日新聞の記事です。
I can't remember the exact timing, but this was an article in the 1990s.
そして今年の4月に北朝鮮の非常に緊迫した状況がありました。
And then in April of this year, there was a very tense situation around North Korea.
北朝鮮がもしかしたら日本に核ミサイルを撃つかもしれないという、こういう危険な状況になりました。
And there was, or it came to the situation where there was a risk of North Korea actually sending a nuclear missile towards Japan.
それで私はツイッターにこう書きました。
And I wrote in Twitter according to this as follows.
もし日本に核ミサイルが撃ち込まれて、この時朝日新聞が一発だけなら誤射かもしれないと言えば、私は朝日新聞の社長を半殺しにすると。
And I wrote, well, if a missile is to come flying towards Japan, if North Korea does shoot a missile towards Japan, and if the Asahi Shimbun says, or the president of the Asahi says that this was a mistake, well, then I would, go and take him on. This was my statement.
岩崎さん、何か文句ありますか
？Do you have any complaints in regards to that? Thank you for your opinion. And to add, that was a nuclear missile that was being referred to.
社長に言うててください。
Please pass this on to your head.
Okay, thank you. We have to stop there. Mr. Hyakuta has lived up to his reputation for being outspoken. We thank him very much for his speech and for his comments. We hope he'll visit us again. And to encourage him, as is the tradition of the club, we would like to give him a one-year honorary membership to the Foreign Correspondence Club.
皆さんありがとうございます。
Thank you very much.